From the Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, it's Just the Tip-STERS with Melissa Morgan.
Oh, hi there.
Today with special guests Laura Frizzo and Jeremy Ogden from Investigation Discovery's Dead North. If you've got a tip for Melissa, a clue to a mystery in your hometown, a lead on a cold case, how to pick which real housewife will be betrayed this week, anything, tell us about it by calling the Tipster hotline at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837, or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. You just might hear your tip on the podcast. And now here's your host. Her Amazon wish list has once again been tagged by the NSA, Melissa Morgan.
More cowbell. You know, screw the NSA. I don't think you're really like a solid threat until like the TSA goes through your back.
I don't think the NSA likes being told to screw off much.
Well, do you think they listen to this podcast?
Oh, yes.
No,
actually,
they don't.
Listen to Listen, the NSA listens to everything.
I don't think so, because if they knew the number of times I said, never mind. I don't think so. I don't think so.
Well, no, everything, baby.
And now there's some black SUVs pulling up in front of the house.
Thank you very much.
No, it's not happening.
Okay.
And by the way, it will be Shannon who will be betrayed this week on The Real Housewives.
Oh, really?
Why you got to be such a hater? Why?
You betrayed me. I hear that every time.
Mm-hmm.
Or no, she betrayed me. Because they're usually complaining to another Real Housewife. I'm sorry.
You know, you're just a hater. It's a great show. It makes me feel better about myself. They have money I don't, and they're still miserable. So you know what? Let me enjoy my guilty little pleasure.
Okay.
That and my Amazon wish list, which apparently is being...
It's kind of scary sometimes.
The Real Housewives or my wish list?
Both.
Okay. So sometimes in this lifetime, you find people you think of as true heroes, and sometimes they are portrayed correctly, and sometimes, you know, it can be edited to make them look a little better than they are. But if you have not seen the Investigation Discovery documentary, Dead North, you are missing out on real-life heroes who have done spectacular things in their lives and their careers, and especially a captivating case of a missing man named Chris Regan. So if you haven't seen Dead North, the bare bones of this case is that a woman and her husband who lived in Indiana fled, possibly after murdering someone, and moved during the dead of winter to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, hence the title Dead North. And while they were there, a man goes missing who has a connection to them, to the wife especially. Her name is Kelly Cochran. His name is Jason Cochran. I'll give you a little spoiler alert. One of them doesn't make it out alive. And it is called Season 1 of Dead North. I don't know if there'll be a Season 2 or if it will be an update. But Season 1 is absolutely available on Investigation Discovery on demand. So if you have access to Investigation Discovery, you can watch the series again on demand. If you have Amazon or Vudu, it's available there. And it is a fascinating watch. And what's even more fascinating is that it's all true. It's a true story. So I watched this documentary numerous times because it's so much and so layered and so fascinating. And the people profiled in it, besides the missing man, are so captivating and fascinating to watch. And that's Chief of Police of Iron River in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, Chief Laura Frizzo, and a homicide detective from Hobart, Indiana, Detective Jeremy Ogden. And I fell madly in love with both of them and reached out via social media, and can't believe they even answered me back because I was probably slobbering.
You were a little fangirly.
A little? No. Just adore them with all of my heart. And to think that they're real people is just like, wow, they're real people, but they're kind of special real people. So when producer Mark had a business event in Chicago, I knew they weren't too far away. So I said, hey, I'm just some, crazy bitch who hosts a podcast, and I'm going to be somewhere in your hood. Meet me at Starbucks. Say, would you? And I'll be goddamned if they didn't actually show up.
They did. They did. And they were great people.
And horrifyingly, they're just as beautiful in person. God damn it. They're beautiful inside and outside. I'm not trying to be shallow and vain, but I could just sit and stare at them forever and listen to them talk forever because they're fascinating and interesting and have huge hearts and great minds, and they're easy to look at. They're easy on the eyes. So if you haven't seen Dead North, I really implore you. It's so worth every minute of your time. Life is short, and don't watch shitty shows. This one's not a shitty show. This one is an amazing documentary. And we were really blessed that they agreed with some chloroform and
now
promises of huge payouts.
No.
No, they didn't need any of that.
No, it's a fascinating case.
They agreed to appear on our...
And they wanted to talk about it because it's an amazing case.
Well, they told us that they actually don't discuss the case. And it's it's in the past, and it was what brought them together. But now they're in the present and looking toward the future. So I think as fascinating as it is to me, and hopefully the conversation will be fascinating to you, tipsters. I think it's almost like bringing it back up and reminding them, like, oh yeah, we did this. I think they're not the type that rest on their laurels, and they don't just sit back and wait for something to be given to them. They are, still busting their butts in what they're doing in their lives. And it's just something they did. It's just something that they did, but what they did was spectacular and magical. This is a pretty fascinating case about what could potentially be a female serial killer, which is also extraordinarily rare. And it's really fascinating and captivating. I think it's well laid out in an amazing timeline, and the patience and time that it took to investigate this case and for the documentary film crew to cover this case. It all comes together in a pretty fascinating package. It's immensely watchable. I hope that you will watch it, and I hope you will enjoy our interview with Laura Frizzo and Jeremy Ogden. So I always feel like you can tell a lot about a person by how they take their coffee. So when we got to meet Laura Frizzo and Jeremy Ogden at a Starbucks in a nameless city in Indiana, Jeremy, I wanted to get their order, and Jeremy's like, "Do they have coffee here?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, it's a Starbucks, but they probably put shit in it you don't want in it." And he's like, "Can I just have a coffee?" So I go up, and I have to be honest, the barista was like, "What do you want? Just coffee?" And I'm like, "Yeah, can you just give them a cup of drip coffee and just put some espresso in it?"
Yeah, what were you calling it? You were calling it something, and what was it?
Like a lot.
Something I'd never heard. It must be something from wherever you're from.
Maybe an Americano or something like
yeah,
that.
no. Even the guy at Starbucks looked at her and he was like, "What are you saying?"
Yeah, well, we talk funny, even though we're from different parts. Yeah. So in case Jeremy didn't sleep that night, there was an extra shot in there. I don't know if that mattered to you or not, espresso. And Laura gets
that was perfect.
That's awesome. That's great. And Laura drinks the mango dragon fruit refresher, which is my favorite because it turns purple. So I feel like you can learn a lot about people by the fact that they just went good old Americano standard coffee and a fancy purple passion fruit drink. I think that kind of sums you two up personality-wise, if you ask me. I think it really does. So we're really blessed to have Laura Frizzo and Jeremy Ogden from the ID Network documentary Dead North that aired in the end of May of this year, 2018. And if you have not seen it, there's something terribly, terribly wrong with you, and you need to go watch it right now. It's available on the Investigation Discovery's on-demand service. You can get it there. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it on Vudu. And it's so worth your time. Every minute of it is engaging, engrossing, frightening, wonderful, passionate, crazy. It's a roller coaster. it's an adult roller coaster. It's not a little sissy one. It's a big, scary roller coaster that is fantastic and amazing. And I wonder if you two even knew what kind of roller coaster you were getting on with this case. So Laura, when you're the chief of police of Iron River Police Department, and you had been there for 20 years, is that?
Almost 22 at the end.
22.
Yeah.
So how long were you the chief?
3 years.
3 years, okay. So when you're the chief of police, the first female chief of police in the Upper Peninsula, and Terry O'Donnell comes to you and as you're getting ready to leave one night and says, my friend is missing. Did you have any idea what was going to happen?
No, not at all. I mean, quickly, I knew, within 24 hours that something was terribly wrong. But initially, I looked at her and I thought, that she was just overreacting. I really did. I thought, he obviously went somewhere. You don't know his every move, Yeah, you're friends and you dated, but, everybody does things and doesn't have to, he didn't have to tell her what he was doing or report to her. And I just thought, let's give it till Monday. I have a feeling he'll be back, and so that was initial. And then when I started talking to Laura Sartori, who was his boss at work, I actually started talking to her that same night. And then I started thinking, okay, maybe something's not right here, just from the things she told me. So, yeah, it did quickly turn.
You were so calm when, the reenactment shows that Terry's telling you. You were so calm. You were like, everything that you just said. He's an adult. He's an outdoorsman. Happens a lot. People go missing. They come back.
Right. I mean, he was in the military for 20 years. He was a, master sergeant, and he was an avid hiker and outdoorsman. So I was thinking, he's fine. That was initial.
Exactly. And Terry was, she was like pretty shaky. It looked like she was pretty shaky when she approached you. And I have to say, I guess it was body cam video from Detective Barrett.
Yes.
She seemed like a amazing salt of the earth human. And they say that, a really good leader surrounds themselves with great people to make them even look better. And it doesn't matter if they do a better job than the leader. It shows up in everyone's work. It's, everyone is shown to be an amazing part of this, a cog in this wheel. So
Sergeant Barrett actually she is an amazing person. She retired, but she actually was the undersheriff for the county for a few years. She came to Iron River after I got hired because, I think she was a little bit fed up as well with the, females are just not treated very well, okay, in law enforcement up there. So, and in most places, not just up there.
Right.
But she left there because she had taken youth, for a long time. So, initially when she and I started working together, she had a lot more experience than I did, and we didn't really get along. We had totally different personalities, but she's incredibly intelligent. And it literally took years for us to work together and bond. And it's so strange because women should be empowering each other, but really, she was a little, crotchety towards me. So, and then we just gained respect, and it was really interesting to over the years, she respected the fact that I was a good investigator. She was asking me to help her with hers. She really just kind of bent back to the fact that, wow, she's good at what she does, so that respect was there, and we got very close. So she actually was a sergeant at the department, and when the chief's position came available, we both applied for it, and I got the job over her. And, so there was a little bit of, I felt kind of weird, and I didn't want to, upset her, but it didn't affect anything. I mean, she respected me, and we worked well together. And
I feel like you could see that. You could see that in just the small amount of time that she was interviewed for the documentary. You could see in her face and her eyes and her reactions her respect for you. I have the feeling that when she goes into Starbucks, she gets an Americano also.
I think you're right.
I think she's probably salt of the earth kind of girl.
She is.
So why do you think with all of the information that you had, and at the time you had a four-person department with a case like this, why do you think that the Michigan State Police was just sort of like, well, he just walked away, or he killed himself? Where do you think they...
Unfortunately, at one time I had, I think, there was one guy, they were all detectives really, that was their rank, but one guy was in charge of, basically the workflow, whatever they called it. They had a word, a phrase for whatever they called it, but it was rapid start or something where, one of the detectives sat off to the side and said, okay, maybe you should go in this direction, you should go in this direction, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, why don't we just sit here and talk about what we know and just kind of delegate who should do what and work together on this instead of giving out pieces of paper. And so then I had, the four other detectives sitting there in front of me, and I think that, you had the one guy who was just like the leader, and he was like the one that he was gonna run the show.
Right.
And he had the ego thing, and the others, I think, were just solid, and that's how it goes. They're like, because I had a couple guys tell me, we really did agree with you. It's just we didn't really know what to do, So because I'm standing there saying, this is what I think, and this is what I think we should do, and blah, 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 he was going to go against it. No matter how, in my opinion, I thought, how can you be a detective and this high ranking in your department, and it's such a prestigious department? I'm just from, lowly Iron River PD. In fact, he made the comment to me, have you even had retraining? Have you even had... I'm like, no, I haven't, and I'm thinking in my head, I haven't had all these trainings like you have, but how do you not know and have the common sense to know as a detective, which direction you need to go in right now? So I think more than anything, I can't for the life of me imagine that he really didn't know. I just feel like it was like an ego thing, and I've seen it with other departments before where, if somebody doesn't want to give credit to someone else, they will intentionally go in a different direction, to avoid or, restrict that person from getting that attention over them.
Wow.
And at the cost of the case,
right. And it's not we're not talking about a shoplifting case.
Right.
We're talking about someone's life and potentially death, what turns out to be their death. And that's one of the things that bothers me greatly. And one of the reasons I started this podcast is not only my obsession with true crime and solving puzzles and getting justice, but there are so many brilliant people of both genders in law enforcement, and the ones that are not open to hearing someone else's theories. You may not have had quote unquote retraining, but you had something so much more valuable and priceless, which is your gut and your knowing and your intelligence and your history of,
there were so many things like down the road even. I just kind of took off in my own direction, and when I got to the point where I needed to go to Indiana to collect the DNA, and I'm on my own, I'm by myself, and I called one of the detectives that I had worked more with. He was more in my jurisdiction, and I said, I really would like you to come with me. Do you think they would let you? Because I said, I've never done this before, and I'm just going. And, he called me back and he said, my superiors won't let me go with you. They don't think you have enough for a case. And I thought, okay, so here I go. I'm going to go.
Yeah,
so,
from minute one, you struck me as the kind of person that asks for forgiveness and not permission.
Oh, exactly.
And those are the people that get shit done. Let's just be honest.
Especially when you just know, you have to do it.
Right.
You just, and, they were looking more, like this detective in particular was looking more at, the skeletons in Chris Regan's. Not that that's not important, to look at what does he have in his closet, he's got some debt out there, he had bad, 2 bad marriages and divorces, and maybe he liked, just looking for the negative. And I'm like, everybody has negative, especially when you're, 53 years old.
Right, you've lived a life, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Let's look at what the positives are versus what the negatives are, and really see what kind of person this was. And it's like, to me, again, it was just like a common sense, like, this guy's really a good guy. I can't believe you're trying to make him look like, someone trying to run away from his past. And he kind of tried to make it sound that way. And it's like, that's not what's happening.
Yeah, I don't know, obviously, all of the details in the past, but I it didn't seem like he was the kind of guy that had any reason to run or anywhere to run to. I mean, getting a new job, you know, I don't want to victim shame, but I will be honest with you, at the beginning of this, seeing beautiful Terry O'Donnell's little sparkling eyes and how cute they look together, and then no offense and not victim shaming, then seeing Kelly Cochran, I'm thinking, dude, could you just not fucking keep it in your pants?
But that's men in general. I mean, really.
Hi, Jeremy. Hi, Mark.
I mean, if they don't admit it, they're liars. Because, you know, I mean, my own father told me a long time ago, because I could never comprehend, you know, you see a man with a beautiful wife and sweet as can be, and my own father told me this many years ago. He said, you know, a man will jump the fence for any woman that'll stroke his ego. And he said, I'm ashamed to tell you that, but it's the truth.
Wow.
You know, and some men, okay, obviously it's not all men,
right,
but a large majority of men, I think, like, they need that ego to be stroked. And if, you know, I mean, their wife gets boring after a while if they can't keep stroking that ego. And I'm not a big ego stroker either. So, I mean,
yeah, I don't know.
I'm probably an ego killer.
I would say you walk a nice line. I don't think Jeremy puts up with shit, so I'm not saying, other than the mango dragon fruit drink, then he'll put up with that. But other than that, I'm not seeing it. I was, like I said, I didn't want to victim shame him, but I just was sort of flabbergasted. But I try to put myself in someone else's shoes, someone who's missing or someone who's murdered, and in such an awful way, if it's not just something random, which is like 15% of cases, it's 85% of cases are they're known to you. But
I think with Chris, you know, his plan was to leave. His plan was to move in with his son. And so for him, Kelly was someone to hang out with once in a while, someone to spend time with. He was a personal person, like a very private person, where this is a guy you'd never see in a bar. He didn't go to the bars. He didn't go out and mingle with people. You know, I talked to a few women that he met on dating sites that went on dates with him and really liked him, and they said, you know, he's the guy that our date would be a picnic basket with an expensive bottle of wine and some cheese and, you know, on the blanket in the park, and he's just the kind of guy he was. And and even, you know, a couple of these women said, you know, even though it didn't work out for us, he still was like, if you need anything, call me. You know, he'd come over and fix, you know, if they had a broken door or whatever, and something in their house that needed to be repaired, he'd be there to do it for them. So he was just that kind of guy. But I think with Kelly, he just, she was there for, you know, someone to socialize with and maybe be intimate with when he felt like it, but he did not. I mean, he certainly did not want anyone to know that he was hanging out with her.
Well, right, and the age difference, and Chris looks like a very active, athletic man, and he was, you know, getting a little older, and it was obvious Terry adored him, and maybe if she were, you know, a little more piss and vinegar, you know, he would have been more interested. But I have a feeling, and I could be wrong, it seems like Kelly, according to what, you know, the neighbor David Saylor said, she'd be like, you know, you look good today, you look attractive. Right. I think she's that girl that would, you know, he's outside at a break and she's like, hey, I'm not wearing underwear. Exactly. What are you doing later? Right. And I mean, that's probably difficult for, you know, and he wasn't married to Terry, you know, and he was moving, and it felt like it was sadly like my last fling in town. I'm going to hit the road, and oh no, I'm not going to make this out of here alive. Right. That's what it felt like to me, which is, like I said, I don't want to victim shame him, because nothing he did would qualify him to be murdered. Absolutely nothing that he did. So you have this wonderful small police force, and how does Molly Barron and Jim McNeil from Delta Force PI, how did they become involved? A girl that I went to high school with was friends with Jim, and she and I were talking about the case, and I was, you know, it was right from the beginning of the case, and I would just kind of confide in her that, you know, what I was doing and where my stuck points were, whatever. And she just said, you know, I have this
friend, and he's a private investigator. He was actually retired from Escanaba Public Safety Department, after 20-some years. And I just thought, I was at that point where I was starting to kind of branch out to whoever could give me whatever skill they had. Okay, this guy might have a skill here that this guy doesn't have, and he'll help me. So I was just getting top skills from every person I could find. And so I did connect with him, and I said, why don't you take a look at these interviews and tell me what you think? And he went over it with me and kind of confirmed what I was thinking, because right at that point I was the only one thinking I was right. So I did want to run it by other people, just to kind of confirm that in my mind that I was doing the right thing, and he did, and of course I had spoken to my prosecutor and said, making sure she doesn't have an issue with him, kind of looking at these things with me and discussing these things. And so he ended up getting hired, and I don't know if it was by the family or someone in the community that retained him.
A fundraiser. Yeah.
My friend was actually a part of that, and that was weird, because that was often. I didn't even know that was taking place,
right.
that was happening, until it was probably 6 weeks, 2 months after my initial meeting with him, where I actually had Kelly in my office one day, and it was the day that I actually did the search warrant on the house. And Jim and Molly came into my office and said, "Hey, we just want to let you know we're in town, and we've been hired to kind of do our thing, and we don't want to interfere." So that was really respectful that they did that, and they stopped in, and it just happened all. It all happened the same. It was just a very odd coincidence.
No. There are no coincidences, my friend.
Right.
So you end up, serving a search warrant, and the following day they skip back to Indiana.
Right, the very next day.
Very next day.
Right, so the day that we did the search warrant, we finished at like 10 o'clock at night, and when we left, I had gotten information from one of the neighbors that Kelly was outside with a flashlight, looking around the ground for a long time after we left. And and it was interesting because, eventually we find that rabbit foot.
Right.
And, she's a keeper of trophies, trinkets of her victims. So I'm sure that, that's what she was possibly looking for, to get that picked up. But I'm not sure. That was my guess. So,
no, wait, she has trinkets?
Well, there's, her claim is that there's a trinket trophy bag that is still out there, and we believe that. Jeremy and I both do.
Oh, I didn't know that. I was going to say, you brought up the butterflies during the documentary and her 14 tattoos, and I have to say, I've often worried that if anything happened to me and law enforcement entered my home, they would probably just back out screaming because I have a whole lot of unicorn shit.
Yeah.
And they'd probably be like, wow, she must stab dudes with something, with a shiv. I also have a lot of books on forensics and serial killers and yoga, so they can make out of that what they want to make out. I did not know that she had a trinket bag, so she was probably looking for the rabbit's foot. That is horrifying.
Yeah, that's just my opinion.
It's probably a good one.
Yeah. So then the next morning they were gone, and they took their dogs. They took, some of their clothes, but everything was left behind, and everything, including Jason's 9 marijuana plants that he was growing. And they were pretty nice plants. So.
Well, at least he had his priorities straight.
Right.
Yeah, that he was a good gardener, had a green thumb, a nice green thumb. So you end up, finding out where they are. From help with the neighbors, with recruiting confidential informants. If this case doesn't open law enforcement's eyes to the joy and productivity of working together, I can't imagine what else could. It is the most amazing, primer of how to work together and how it takes a goddamn village, literally. Right. Your tenacity for sure, but so you end up in Indiana, and you end up running across this homicide detective, Jeremy Ogden.
Right.
So, Jeremy, have you ever had a case like this? I know you've had a lot of experience in homicide in different jurisdictions, but have you ever had a case like this come at you?
No. No, this case is very unique. She's very unique. And, from the very beginning, I was very intrigued with the case. And it's just something that you don't see. A lot of people don't even see a case like this in their whole career.
Right. Right. I always think that, like, I'm originally from Kentucky, and I would think Indiana and Michigan would be places you would go to not be murdered. But apparently, and in such an odd way, but apparently that's wrong. So Jeremy, I'm just going to call you this, and I hope that you take this for all the positive things it can be. You're a chameleon. You're an amazing chameleon. So you are. So you're the guy who can be, kind of green and brown, like camo colored, and you hold hands across the interview table with a monster, and you say, if you want, I'll listen. I'm here to listen to you. And then if you're not getting exactly what you want, or on a different day when the suspect is behaving differently, you're the magenta chameleon who raises his voice and says, look at me, look me in the eyes. And I think it's spectacular police work as well as spectacular work as a human to relate to suspects like this on that level. I mean, I feel like you can be anything you need to be at the time. And it's a fantastic thing to watch someone like you on that tightrope. And it's fascinating. I mean, like, were you curious as a child, or did you always want to be in law enforcement, or did you just develop being a chameleon over the years of your work?
Well, when I was younger, I thought of being a policeman, probably at the age of 16, 17. And then, when I was 17 years old, my girlfriend's father, stepfather, was murdered, and her father were murdered. And they were murdered about a week apart from one another. Wow. And so, their cases went unsolved.
Wow. And, were they connected at all?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes, in a way they are. And so, it always, I constantly thought about that case as I was growing up and, getting older. And, when the time came, I started applying to law enforcement agencies. And ultimately, I got offers from 3 different agencies, and I chose Hobart. And I went there, and, I started out in patrol like everyone does, and I spent a couple years there, and then I became head of the K-9 division. And then from there, I went to the DEA and worked for the DEA task force as a task force officer for 5 years, and then came back to be commander of investigations for Hobart, and then went back to being a detective sergeant there at the end, and just started working cases again. So, I've been up and down, the spectrum when it comes to things to do in law enforcement. But yeah, this case and doing interviews with people it's a different type of animal, and each person is different. Right. And for instance, in the beginning of this case, one of the things that was most instrumental in me being able to develop a plan to be able to talk to her and know how to communicate with her in a way that was going to be beneficial was because Laura was so forthcoming with everything. I asked Laura, to send me every document that she had. I asked Laura to send me every video that she had. And the minute I asked, I started getting, I think, faxes, I think emails, and it was just print. And, I was compiling a pile by the end of that day. I had a huge pile. And then that night I came home and I reviewed all of Laura's reports and every report that had been generated about the case. And the next day when I went in, I think it was in the afternoon, I received the videos. And then that night I watched all of the videos, and I was able to watch the videos of Kelly's previous interviews before I went into my very first interview with her.
Okay.
And So the first night, I had pretty much, when I sat there and I read all of Laura's reports and everything, and I came back in the morning, I called Laura like at 8:30 in the morning, and I said, all right, look, grab a pen and paper. I have some questions and some things that, you might need to try to figure out or get answers for me. And, she was very receptive, and she listened, and she answered all my questions for me, and what questions she couldn't answer right then, she figured out answers for them down the road. And,
so you were literally working together as a team before you even met?
Yeah, I had never met her. Just spoke to her over the phone that first day, and I think the first afternoon I talked to her again because she was in the middle of this, another murder trial at that time. So communication was I think kind of slim right then, and because she was busy taking care of that. So I think I talked to her again that evening, but I just sat there and I started reading everything. And that very first phone call I made to Laura the next morning, I told her these people absolutely did this. You're right. You're 100% right. There's no doubt in my mind, and I'm going to figure a way to do this. And that first night that when I was reading everything, I started, thinking, it's going to take something very unique with this woman to get her to talk about something that she's the only one who knows the answer to.
Right.
And so how do you get somebody to tell you something when they're the only one who knows the answer and it's going to put them in jail? And so I started going down that line. And, then very quickly here, Walt is presented, with this anonymous tip to the line or the tip to the line, and then ultimately, I call Walt up and ask him to come to Hobart to meet me. And it was funny because on the phone he said, well, why do you want me to come there? And I said, I have to meet you in person before I can trust you. Yeah. And I said, it's really important for me to see you, talk to you, ask you some questions. And I said, I'll come to you. And he's like, I'm 3 hours away. And I said, I'll come to you. And he said, no, you don't have to. I'll come to you. He said, I'm sure you're very busy right now. And I said, I really am. And that would be great if you would come to me. And the next day, Walt came to meet me. And after I met Walt, and he actually showed up with his wife, and we all sat down and talked. And that very first day that I met Walt, I had already come up with the idea of the letter.
Wow.
And so the letter was already in my mind, and I was working it back and forth. And, one of the questions I asked Walt was, when was the last time you met with them before his death, before Jason's death? And Walt told me, it was just a few weeks before. And I said, okay, this is going to work. And I said, was there ever a time that she got up and left the table? And he said, yeah, she did. She got up and went to the bathroom. And I said, he asked you for your address. And so then I started scripting it. And then Walt, I'm scripting the letter, and Walt throws in there, he would never sign the letter, Jason. He would sign it quack, quack.
Yeah.
So Walt added a couple things. He had me change a couple things. And, so together, this letter call comes together. And then, ultimately it's the time and the point where that call's made and her response occurs. And I already knew she did it, and I already knew that she was deeply involved in the whole thing and had all the answers that we wanted. But it was that call that it was like, okay, there's no doubt here. No one can ever doubt from what we just heard.
That was when it seems like you thought we got her.
I did. Right at that moment. That's as soon as Walt hung up the phone, my partner looked at me. Steve Houck was in the back seat of the car, and Walt was sitting in the driver's seat, and I was in the passenger seat. And Steve Houck looked at me, and he said, "You got her. You totally got her." I said,
"Go ahead."
For a few seconds. And I told him, I said, yeah, we got her for a few seconds. She's thinking now.
Right, she's thinking.
She's thinking now, and she's trying to figure this out, and she's trying to figure out whether or not this is a ruse. And I said, so now it's all about playing it the right way afterwards. And then I think, okay, so here I have her, she is aware that there's this letter now, and it's being sent to the Iron River Police Department, and there's no return address on it. and if it, if her mind wanders to the direction of it has all the answers to this crime in it, what's the only way that she can come forward and say anything about this to try to spin it?
That she's a victim.
That's right.
Yeah, that she did nothing. She was just she stood by as Jason the monster.
That's right.
Yeah. Did you know at the time when you came up with and I'm sorry, Mark, well, I'll get right back to you. At the time when you came up with the letter idea, did you know that Jason was like an avid journalist, writer that wrote all in a journal? Did you know that?
Yeah, Laura had already sent me the his little writings and his books and stuff like that. She had sent me photocopies of that stuff.
Because there's a lot of people, and men especially, if someone were to say, he sent me a letter saying, if anything happens to me, mail this to the police department, and if it were a female or a male suspect, they'd be like, oh, fuck you, he doesn't write letters. But knowing, that may not have worked, but you knew enough quickly. You figured out quickly the psychology of what might work. So I'm sorry, Mark, what were you going to say?
Well, I just want to make sure that our audience knows that I don't want to give too much away about the documentary because we want everybody to watch it. But who was Walt?
I'll give you a hint. Everyone dies. Go ahead.
No, who was, just a quick explanation as to who Walt was.
Walt Ammerman is Jason's best friend, and they were gaming buddies. And when I say this took a village, I mean, seriously, Laura's the mayor of Villagetown, and Jeremy is the CEO of Villagetown, and they fucking ran this village of neighbors and friends and coworkers and ex-lovers and mothers and brothers, and everyone came together with a piece. I hate to say this, especially because of the way Chris was killed and the way he was dismembered, but it was a puzzle that the entire village had to bring a piece in, and they put Chris back together.
Right.
For better or worse, however he came back together, they brought him back together. And some of the, and I'm sorry, producer Mark, I'm going to ruin everything. I'm going to tell everything that happens, but I mean, it's such an amazing case. You can always find out about it, but what you can't find out is watching the process of you two brilliant law enforcement working together even before you met, the way you both did your jobs to, a masterful way. I don't know if you even know this, Jeremy, but when you are talking to someone like Kelly, you mirror her. You mirror her. If she leans forward, you lean forward. If she leans back, you lean back. It's fascinating. It's like you're a Freudian psychologist or something, whether you know it or not. And some of the words you used were amazing. I don't even know how you came up with them. Trying to couch what happened to Chris in a way that Kelly would feel comfortable, and trying to play on whatever feelings she may have. You used words like tombless and graveless, saying, I need to bring Chris home. And that was the goal that both of you had. That was your entire goal that both of you were working toward. Bring Chris home, bring his friends and sons and family closure, not closure, but peace of mind. There's never closure, but a small peace of mind. You use these amazing words like tombless and graveless, that he would never have a grave or never have a tomb, and there needed to be closure. And Kelly would then mirror you and say, that's when Jason began to downsize him.
Right.
When you gave her permission to be a victim, which is what she was trying to portray the entire time, she took that and ran. Who describes dismembering a human as downsizing?
Right.
Well, Kelly Cochran does. And,
right.
She's unique by every aspect of the word.
You said she always wanted you to diagnose her, and I know you're not saying you're a clinical psychologist. Do you think she's bipolar? And that's actually a question for both you and Laura. Do you think there's And you can say, of course, she's mentally ill because she kills people and has no conscience. But let's just...
I know a lot of people who are bipolar, and there's a huge difference in people who are bipolar and people who are just evil.
And you really do feel like it's just evil?
I do.
Okay. That's...
Yeah, she's evil. She's very, very... her level of intelligence is through the roof.
Yeah, Jeremy, you probably agree with me, right? I mean, most of the drug addicts, criminals, that we dealt with in our careers, I mean, most of them have personality disorders like being bipolar, unfortunately. It's really I feel like it's a very common mental issue, and it affects so many people in different, various stages or degrees. And so I think that, in law enforcement, you work with a lot of people that have a bipolar disorder, and Kelly was not, unstable whatsoever. Kelly was very calculating and very intelligent and planned out and
cognizant
thorough
of what she was doing. Yeah. I've diagnosed myself and everyone else I know as being somewhere on the autism spectrum, except for the people that we know in our lives who have been diagnosed autistic, and I don't know how they're autistic, but
right.
I don't know what that spectrum is like, but I'm pretty sure I am, and I'm positive Mark is, right, Mark?
Well, and I refer to myself as
I have no comment at this time.
You've referred to yourself as what, Laura?
Oh, I said, and I've jokingly referred to myself as bipolar over the years because I am a very flighty woman. I'm very I get going on something, I get excited, I have highs and lows. A lot of women do. We have hormones and everything else, and I'm typical woman like that. But it's there is a big difference.
No, I got you. I didn't mean to insult anyone in the mental illness world, but I just when Jeremy said she was always asking me to diagnose her, I mean I don't know that evil is a diagnosis.
I think that one of the reasons that she was asking me to diagnose her was legal defense wise, and
didn't even think of that.
Another aspect of her, that not a whole lot of people really know is that she is the only person that I've ever met in my entire career that can use heroin one day and not use it the next, or the next, or the next.
Fascinating.
She is that in control of her body. She's the only person that I know that has been hooked up to a polygraph and was a complete flatline throughout the entire test.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And
that's pretty telling.
And the polygrapher that did her examination is an amazing agent and did many years with the ATF.
He's with the FBI, right?
Right.
No, it was ATF.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, it was the ATF agent. But he had done them for 25 years. He had done polygraphs, I think, and he said he had never ever once had anyone like her.
Wow. I mean, that isn't surprising, but it is somewhat shocking to hear. And I have to say, Mr. Chameleon, when you were saying to Kelly, and I was a little thrown back because I thought, why is he saying this? You said to her, I know Jason loved you more than anything else in the world, and I know you loved Jason more than anything else in the world. Was that something you were just saying to get her to feel like, oh, he believes me? Because later on she said, I know you never thought I would do anything bad. I couldn't do anything bad. Do you actually think she has the capability to love? I mean, if you're going to... Yeah, I didn't think so. But I had to ask. I had to ask.
The only thing she does is, her relationships are opportunity and for her own personal gain in whatever manner she sees fit. Right. And how she's going to use somebody.
I did find it.
They all are.
I found it fascinating that the HR person from the shop where she and Chris worked said that she was a really hard worker.
Oh my gosh, she was. Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Even her neighbors, when I interviewed the neighbors and whatnot, I mean, they liked her. She'd be out there mowing the lawn. She had this neighbor that was 90-some years old, and she'd be over there mowing his lawn for him.
Right.
She was a very hard worker. She could work better than I was told than most of the men she worked with. So,
and most narcissists are charming. I mean,
right.
that's how they get away with.
I mean, bringing food to the neighbors. Hey, I made pizza. You want to try it? You know, this. I mean, just that kind of person, like over the top.
So
she's really slick. I mean,
right.
during the investigation here, you know, it was discovered that, you know, she had like 5 churches on speed dial and had everything figured out where the particular day of the month that she could go there and con her way into money out of the church.
Really?
And she would.
She had a notebook.
Every month.
Mm-hmm.
Does that play into the phone call at the end when her mom says, you know, did you try to get help? And she said, I did. I tried. It didn't work. Was that, you think, from a religious faction, or do you think she tried psychotherapy, or do you think that was just a lie?
No, I think it was just a lie.
Yeah, I don't know that she ever would be able to let go of her control freak to get help.
One thing you have to remember is that, you know, the text messages that her and Jason had between each other for the entire year prior to Chris's death were horrible. I mean, on her part. She, you know, you had a man who was beaten down emotionally, mentally, begging his wife to stay home with him, be with him. It was driving him insane. And she was horrible to him, belittling, and she couldn't stand him, and he made her sick, and she was horrible. So, and then all of a sudden they do this horrible act, and they kill, you know, Chris. And, you know, you think that if it was in fact, you know, the husband was jealous and he shot him out of a rage of jealousy, and she was devastated because she loved him, you know, that she'd be upset.
Right.
She'd be sorrowful. And I'm reading these texts, and it's like, so 2 days after they kill him and dismember him, she is like the most turned on person in the world. This was like the most erotic thing he could have ever done, or they could have ever done. And the text messages were explicit from her. It was all her, you know, sexually, whatever. And to me, again, that just goes with the whole evil thing, you know, that it's to me, I have never, ever seen anything like it.
So you end up with all of this evidence over time. Now Mark has got me on pins and needles, like I don't want to give anything away, but let's just say there was a piece of Chris found by the documentary film crew. You find in the fire pit the zipper pull, the grommet, his car at the park and ride, the text messages. The FBI puts a GPS tracker is able to go through Chris's Hyundai Genesis and find out that his last place his car was at the Cochran home.
That stuff didn't, and that GPS actually didn't come back till after she confessed.
Oh.
So that was a little bit.
Yeah, that was actually right before trial, right, Laura?
Yes.
Wow.
So, like I think I had said before, you know, I don't know where we'd be at if Jeremy hadn't stepped into the picture at this point. That Kelly would definitely not be in custody. Where she would be, what would be, because, you know, even though that GPS would have come back and would have shown, okay, look, here, you know, here's proof that he was at their place. Now we know. So we know that he was there. But is that still enough to arrest her? No.
Right. It
Still
really.
not enough.
So why do you think she pointed out the forceps?
Well, I mean, this day that we went on the field trip, it was a good day for her. And for whatever reason, I think that she was at a point with Jeremy where she felt like she had him wrapped around her finger, which is exactly what he wanted her to think.
Right.
Because the more she had that thought that, you know, she's winning with Jeremy, she's won him over, whatever, the more she was willing to cooperate. And she felt like a little kid, like a little schoolgirl for some reason, for just a moment, for just that moment.
Wow.
And if you could keep that chemistry, it's almost like something you could feel when you were standing next to her, you know, and I could feel it. And I thought, okay, how can we keep this going today? Because this was a good start. And she, you know, I'm like, what do you want to have for lunch today? What do you want? You know, and it was like, I want this, I want that. And the guys that, you know, were driving us from the sheriff's department were so good to her. And it just, the whole, you know, just the whole feel in the air was perfect for her that day. So
that you were taking care of a VIP.
Exactly. So it was on that field trip. It was like, hey, in fact, we had conversations in the backseat of the car when we were riding together, and she had told Jeremy obviously this before, but she confirmed it with me. Admitted to me right in the car that it took her about 30 seconds to for Jason to stop breathing when she put her hands over his mouth, nose, and mouth. And just like matter of fact, everything was matter of fact that day.
Wow.
So we had talked, about not finding blood evidence in the house or whatever, and that's when she mentioned, she had told Jeremy, in one of the interviews how, and you don't know what bits and pieces of what she said are actual. So she had told Jeremy during, her interviews with him that Jason made her use these forceps to try and dig the bullet, and I thought, bullshit,
Right.
That's bullshit.
Right.
Well, so this day, here we are in the house, and one of the deputies remembered me telling him, about her saying this about the forceps, and he said, did you say something about the forceps? And she's like, yeah. And there they were, and she's like, yeah, there they are. I'm like, no way. I mean, those weren't here last time I was here. Those no way there's. And sure enough, that would end up being the one piece of evidence that did actually have his DNA. And I thought, these people cleaned up so well and did such a good job that evidence people got nothing.
Right.
The
Even tipping up the washer. Yeah.
Right. So the one thing the documentary doesn't really tell correctly, okay, is the state police did 2 search warrants with me there where they collected evidence. The FBI did a 2-day collection as well, and used even more equipment and whatnot, and took so much evidence. And out of all of this, nothing. And she points out something that was sitting there the whole time we were all there on these different occasions. And it's just incredible.
So I have,
and that likely she actually decided all on her own that she was going to try to use these to pull the bullet out.
Oh, for sure, yeah. Jason
it wasn't that Jason told her to do this.
I doubt it. Yeah, I think you're right.
Oh, we know, no way. Yeah, he didn't. As if, Jason's going to tell her to do something.
Right, and she would do it.
And that's just the funniest part to me. And there was a couple of times when she was up on the stand even testifying where Jeremy and I kind of look at each other because we could see when she's talking about Jason being this, frightening person or whatever, and she'd get this little look on her face that, he and I could identify. It was like, oh my God, it's so hard for her to even keep a straight face.
She can't even keep a straight face in her own lies. That's hilarious and sad at the same time.
Right.
So I would love to talk to you for the rest of time, but I know you have lives you have to live. So I was surprised that they called this season 1 of Dead North. Do you think that means there's going to be a season 2, like with updates on Kelly's other victims?
I never heard anything about season. They were so very. They didn't tell us much about
close
anything.
To the vest, yeah.
Yep. So for us, it was like, you're doing these interviews, and and that was all we knew, and then we never got to even preview the documentary. So we had watched it for the first time, like everyone else, and we were. Yeah, so we didn't know what to expect, and I was like, oh my gosh, I hope I didn't say something I shouldn't have, or you know what I mean?
No, I think you both, I think you both came off as the kind of superheroes that don't wear capes but wear badges and go way above and beyond what law enforcement typically we know they do. And I know there are a lot of extraordinarily hardworking people in law enforcement, but
there are.
It's spectacular to see the two of you together, what a team you make. So I know there's some other projects in the works. There's a book by M. William Phelps based on Jason's writings, Where Monsters Hide. And I know there are some other networks that specialize in true crime that are sniffing around. Is there anything that you two would like to do? I know that you're working, I know Jeremy's an executive in the private sector, and I know, Laura, you had said you were consulting, and that's up to you. If you want to say what you're doing, you do not have to. But is there any interest in working together? Because I just think you two are such a goddamn dream team. And I'll tell you, I, am a little bit true crime obsessed. What? Is that shocking? And I saw the preview of Dead North and thought, oh, I cannot wait to see this. And then I see another preview and I'm like, oh, she's really beautiful. I hate her. And then I'm like, God damn it, look at Jeremy's fucking blue eyes. God damn it. And then you start talking and you're both fucking brilliant. And I'm like, I kind of hate them both. And then I watch it and I'm like, I love them both. I love them both so much. So it was like an overwhelming experience. And I've watched it about 5 times now, as Mark can attest. Sometimes he'll come home and I'll be like, look what's happening now. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. Right. And I watched it the first time by myself because Mark was working late, and I saved part 2 and I was like, you have to watch this with me. And I wouldn't tell him anything about it. And I'm horrible. I'm the person that tells you everything. I'm like, hey, I got you something for your birthday. It's a shirt. Like,
that's my son.
I can't keep a secret. I can't keep a secret. So I didn't tell him one goddamn second of what happened. So I watched part 1 with him again. And I look over and he's doing the same thing I am. His mouth is, his jaw is on his knees. And he is just watching it like me. We're just like, it was literally one of the best things I've ever seen.
Well, yes, and I do have one question before we go. I just have to ask: Do you think they really served the hamburgers the way it's presented in the documentary?
Well, I'll tell you, even before I interviewed the sailors, okay, even before. Because it took me a little while to win them over. When I did the first and even the second search warrants at the house, they were not speaking to me. They were not law enforcement fans at all. So it took me some time to win them over. And the first things that we did is, check the freezers because you just don't know.
Oh, my God.
So it was then interviewing them and hearing what they had to say. And I just sat there and kind of let them talk. And I'm like, okay, so the first part of what they said turned out to be exactly what she said it was, which is horrible. And there's really, I don't know, Jeremy, I think Jeremy and I agree on this. It's like, it's hard to understand what could have happened to the rest. And it's
probable.
I hate to say it,
yeah.
And in the discussion, the phone call that she had with her mom,
right.
or it was actually her brother, the letter that she wrote to her brother regarding the pigs they were raising and how upset her brother was because, they claimed to have fed victims to these pigs they had, and then her family ends up eating the pigs. So they were devastated.
Oh, my God. Oh, boy.
Yeah. Yes, that is what she had. Jeremy, did I say that correctly?
Yeah, you did. And, you have to understand, we've tried to be as delicate about this situation as possible because we have the utmost respect for Chris Regan's family and his children. And this is, unfortunately, it's a horrific thing that anybody would have to think about something like that occurring to their loved one. And, facts are facts, and the answer is, do we know? Well, we don't know the answer to that.
And maybe it's best that we don't know, but I have to tell you the pain in David Saylor's eyes when he is describing, it's interesting to hear you say that they weren't law enforcement fans at first because later on when he's being interviewed, David has the most respect for you. It's a beautiful thing to hear him talk. He's like, and I told Chief Frizzo right away. I mean, he was very, he really wanted to help. And
that was the cool thing too about just the 3 hours, letting them sit in there and talk to each other. I mean, every once in a while I'd say, well, what about that? What about this? And kind of direct, give them a change in direction when they needed it. But it's like through their talking to each other in that interview room for 3 hours, all of a sudden David looked at Todd and he's like, dude, I think we ate dude.
I think we ate him, yeah.
And I just sat there going, oh my God, I can't believe what I've just listened to in this room, and this can't be,
And it's if the the Regan family needs any sort of peace, it has to just come from David Saylor's eyes, because here's this guy wearing camo who can't keep himself from crying at the thought of another human being, and saying, no matter if he's a fan of law enforcement or not, saying if they really did what I think they did, they need to be off the street. That's the best ringing endorsement for any sort of monstrous behavior I can imagine. And
just one thing too is, this case, because it did get attention, and we tried to be so respectful, and I had a very close relationship with Chris Jr., and it just, the whole barbecue thing and the way the media made it sound, really we were trying. And I remember when I first heard, it worded like that publicly, and I thought, oh my God. So I immediately reached out to Chris and said, I need to warn you about this. This is what they're presenting, and it has nothing to do with Jeremy and I. I had no idea that anyone would ever put that out there like that.
Right.
Because we never even discussed that. That
no,
possibility.
You didn't. No, you
didn't.
Because
it wasn't important. It didn't need to come out.
No, it wasn't.
So, right. So, it really upset the family. And,
I'm so sorry.
Well, I am too. I just think they needed some time to just not, they're very private, and it really hurt. The boys were real young when this happened, and so we're just kind of hoping that they can heal through all of what has happened.
Right.
And it looks like they are on that path, and because of what you did, because of what you two did.
So do you think you two might be working together at some point?
I hope so.
Yeah, I would love to do that.
I think
talk about it.
The world would be a much better place if there were more partnerships like you two.
Yeah.
And more superheroes like you two that, don't give up and keep going and bring families of people that are missing or murdered. Like I said, I don't even believe in the word closure anymore. Your life is never going to be the same. There's not going to be any closure. But what you can do is find some peace, hopefully, and your grief can be transformed into, the beautiful memories that you have. That's the only thing I can hold on to. And I really can't thank you two enough for taking your time to talk to us and tell us even more of the story. And if again, tipsters...
You're a good person. We recognize that you're a good person.
Oh, no, you have me confused with someone else. No.
That's why we did it.
Well, that means the world to me.
Yeah.
Thank you. That means the world.
The most important thing to us, and you said this earlier, the most important thing to us from the very beginning was finding the answer as to where Chris was.
Absolutely.
And bringing him home to his family. And so for that, and being able to do that, I think that both of us have a great sense of happiness just to have been able to actually give them those answers and put that part to rest for them, and also for their family to get justice. What little justice you can get in a situation like that, they did.
Right.
And they got it to the best of the abilities of the prosecutor's office and Laura's great decision making and doing things, making the right choices throughout this case, and it's self-rewarding.
It's
that's,
a beautiful
that's all
thing.
you ever need. It is.
It's a beautiful thing, and
very rewarding.
I'm telling you, the world's a better place, and we're all really grateful that you're the mayor and the CEO of the village that solved this, and we cannot thank you enough for taking your time, and God bless you for what you've done, and whether you know it or not, you'll be talking to us again, so I have your numbers now. Thank you for everything.
Yeah, you guys
have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you more than we can say to Laura Frizzo and Jeremy Ogden for taking time out of their busy schedule to talk to us. It was a real honor and a privilege to get to hear from their own minds, their mouths, the story and how it went. And we are really blessed to have been given this gift. And thank you so much. And more cowbell.
And remember, if you've got a tip for Melissa, give her a call. 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847 7837 or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. Melissa, do you want a mango dragon fruit refresher?
You betcha.